Hey everyone, Tactics here, and in this video I'll be walking you guys through a timed +20 Tyrannical Nokhud offensive run, giving you some tips and tricks for how we handled various trash pulls and bosses, and even things like lust timings and potential route variations that will help you get your own key timed. Before starting, I do just want to kind of address the elephant in the room that some of you may have noticed. Yes, I did have my YouTube account hacked for a bit there, but luckily I was able to get it back and resolved relatively quickly, so we're back. Everything is good. If you saw you were subscribed to a Tesla account for some reason and were confused as to how that happened, that's how. So make sure you guys do just double check also down below the video that you are still subscribed. We lost a bunch of subscribers from that, but I'm sure everyone's gonna come back eventually. It's all good. We're all okay here. Anyways, hacking situation aside, I'll post links down to my other +20 key walkthroughs down in the description below if you're interested. Otherwise, let's get into this dungeon itself, where unanimously kind of at the beginning here, people tend to just go towards Granth first. Note this is on 1.25 times speed, in case you're wondering why it's a little bit quick, just trying to get through the dungeon in a timely manner here. Heading over, and the first pull we're going to do, as you see, is the patrol coming along the back of the area, the big scary patrol. And the reason for that is, well, at the beginning of the dungeon here, you have all CDs, you have Bloodlust available, and even on Tyrannical week, I don't recommend using a Bloodlust on Granth. You see a lot of people do actually go towards, not a lot, some people are going towards Tempest first here just to get that lust on cooldown there, but I actually think that's a bit of a waste, because if you see this timing here, you will have your lust up for Tempest. So let's go through this. You do have the option, if you're really fast with Dragon Riding, you can pull this pack before it crosses this area. I'm not sure it's worth it. It saves you like maybe 5 seconds of time. It's not a big deal. So we just wait for safety until it passes here, and it gives everyone more time to actually get here. So here we hit this pack, pop Bloodlust, pop all CDs, nuke it. This is a very scary pack. One thing you do kind of want to note, that cast there by the Beastmaster, you couldn't see it over the nameplates there. You really want to try and stop that. That is going to mitigate a surprising amount of damage. But you see this Ahuna starts immediately running out because of that fixate cast to try and hit one of the range DPS. And you see like we're going to swap to it now. I believe we stun it even and nuke it before it's dead. Those Ahuna, they may not look scary, but they are one of the more dangerous mobs in this area if they're able to get that, one, the fixate cast from the Beastmaster goes off, and two, they're able to get to the range for whoever they're fixating and hit them. They hit very hard, so be careful of that. Note that they have low HP, so if they ever do get a fixate off, stun it, whatever, CC it, nuke it down, as we did here. Otherwise, we are just going to kind of chain this pull in later on as this pack starts dying. The big key is these longbowmen. Particularly with raging, we do want to try and get them down. And then once they start getting low, it's just a plane stomper. So I'm going to move with the plane stomper into the next pack. It so happened in this pearl in particular, we were able to cleave it down evenly. Usually that's not the case. And so usually from pull to pull here, you'll be pulling either the plane stompers or these lance masters between packs. Again, it depends on your damage breakdown. If you have a lot of priority damage, so like outlaw rogues, like arcane mages have a lot of priority damage as well. Just depends on your comp. So like that first one, for example, very good priority damage. But as you see here, this Lance Master is a bit higher HP. And as you notice here, I kind of have this whole half of the platform to myself so that this frontal never actually hits anybody. And I'm very careful with movement, trying to leave him close to a longbowman just for cleave. And as you see, longbowmen are dead. It's mostly just the big guy alive. This guy will slowly die. And at that point, we have one person assigned to kick that old Lance Master, and everyone else goes to the next pack. There's that hunt prey that we were able to stop there. Just repositioning slightly can be a bit difficult in this pack, especially because the ground attacks and these stormings, of course. And once that Ahuna rages, as you saw there, we CC'd it and just killed it ASAP. Here, the only range guy left is that Horn Sounder, I believe. So once that goes down, we're going to wait for this Enraged War Spirit to go down as well, because those bleeds with the raging effect is also pretty scary. And then again, you're going to see me do the exact same thing I just mentioned. Only the Plane Stomper is really left. I move into the next pack with said Plane Stomper still alive. We have one person assigned to kick that ability, and then everyone else moves into this next pack. Notice here, if you do come into the pack, make sure, like as a warrior, for example, I didn't charge to, here, I'll show you actually, I'll back up a little bit here when I enter the pack initially. So watch, I'm going into this pack here, and the key is to not try and charge onto a longbowman. If I charge onto a lance master, and because it's between the two longbowmen, they'll initially step in a tiny bit, and so that's a little tip there you can get to group up this pack nicely, as you can see. They're cleavable now instead of being on opposite sides. Very important if you don't have a DK in your group, for example, in this area, because of course otherwise those longbowmen are just going to be on opposite sides of the pack, just shooting you and not group up very easily, not be cleavable easily. So that's something you can do there to kind of potentially group them up a little bit. Otherwise, in this area, the only real big thing you're worried about is stopping those the horn sounder guys. Outside of that, it's really just about making sure you're on top of killing those Ahunas, you're not frontaling your group, and then you're just getting effective cleave. And that's how you get through this area relatively quickly. We can probably skip to the boss here. There's Rally Clan, that's the horn sounder I was talking about. We get through the trash relatively quickly, like 4.5 minutes till the boss starts. For this boss, one thing I do want to note, it's a pretty simple boss, relatively easy. The only thing I would recommend here is do not wait for the eruption cast to use the ballista. Use it as soon as possible. And this does a few things. One, it lets you get your next ballista faster because it goes on cooldown faster. And two, you can actually reduce your raid damage by doing this because you can actually use it to interrupt an additional cast of the Shards of Stone AoE here. See, that time we weren't quite able to, but every other one from there, you'll be interrupting the Shards of Stone cast as well as resetting the eruption timer on the boss. So it's just free damage mitigation and also a faster timer on actually getting those ballista, which do like 5% of the boss's HP. On that topic as well, there currently is a bit of a bug with them, which I assume will be fixed, and we don't do in this video. But if players, specifically I believe it's 2 players, click it at the exact same time, you will shoot 2 ballista bolts, which each do 5% of the boss's health, so you get a lot more damage on the boss, but it will spawn an extra ad, so instead of 1 ad coming, 2 ads will come, so just keep that in mind. Also, I wouldn't worry about this tech too much because I'm pretty sure this is one of those things that will be fixed. It's that kind of bug in Mythic Plus, right? There are some things that you're like, yes, won't be fixed. Some which are like, that's probably going to be fixed. This is one of those moments, so keep that in mind. And otherwise, this boss is pretty chill. Use CC on these saboteurs whenever they come underneath the boss just so you can cleave them. We have like a stun rotation, so like we have like Kidney and Hodge as priority stuns. We have charges that can root mobs, and then we have my stuns as secondary stuns. So lots of ways to lock the mob down underneath the boss. And otherwise, it's a pretty let's catch your breath. Pretty easy boss, maybe one of the easiest bosses this entire season, but either way, a breather for sure in this dungeon, which is very, very not easy outside of this boss. So moving to the Raging Tempest area next. You see we have a few minutes on Lust here, and we decide to go up to the top platform, this top Stormcaller. I'll back up a little bit and show you where that is. It's not there. There it is. The one up top here. You fly up and you fly around this one here because this is one of the more difficult packs to do, I would say, of the 4 Stormcaller packs. And so coming here, we have cooldowns available, and so that's why we opt to this one first. In terms of the trashness here, you can see we have the Storm Speaker marked as well as the Stormcaller, the named mob itself. You really want to make sure you're kicking the Storm Bolts on both of these mobs. Those are the important kicks. They're random target kicks, which is why, so 2 kicks on each can handle all of the Storm Bolts. And then from there, you really want to make sure that the Stormcaller ad, or Storm Speaker ad rather, does not get their Tempest cast off. There's a Tempest. It can be stopped, as you saw there. It was like insta-stopped, basically. But that is a channeled, really, really big ticking hit on your entire party. But you don't need to kick that. You can stop it. So I recommend committing kicks to Storm Bolts and committing stops to that. Outside of that, the Arcing Blade here, previously an exceptionally dangerous tank ability, has kind of been taken down several notches. As you see there, backstep is one of those micro-kiting backsteppable abilities, as I've talked a bit in a bunch of videos in this series. So if you just go up to the mob here, you can just, once the Arcing Blade actually begins casting, you can just back up a tiny bit and take no damage from the ability. It's also now stoppable, as you just saw right there. Previously, this ability was not stoppable whatsoever, but now it's also stoppable. So you can backstep it, you can stop it. It functions a lot like those mobs in Halls of Valor. If you're not sure what I'm talking about there, check out my Halls of Valor video. But it turns these previously very dangerous mobs into mobs that do basically nothing. As you hear, I just back up from that first Arc Blade. I didn't quite back up enough. That second one, I did back up enough. No damage whatsoever from that. There it is. Another example of it. Arcing Strike. Back up, back up. That's a Raging Arc Blade, by the way, that just did 0 damage to me. Very, very useful skill to have as a tank. Just being able to backstep those abilities. That's like the main one in this specific dungeon, but in several dungeons, like I've mentioned, there's the ability to do that. The other thing, as a prot warrior, the Squall, you can spell reflect that and do a bunch of damage. It's kind of a little bit bad, but you know, it's okay. The guys you do actually want to worry about here are the patrolling guys. There's a Kodo, and then there's a bunch of the what are they called? The Storm Shield. There they are. The Primal Storm Shields. Those guys absolutely mess up your tank because they do auto attacks as nature damage, I believe. So what we actually do in this route is try and avoid as many of those as possible. This one in this pack that is mandatory to pull is the only one we pull in the entire dungeon here. We actually skip the Kodo pull patrolling around the boss. It makes it a little bit scarier. I'll talk about how to handle that when we get to the boss fight just after this in a second. But the Kodos and those other Storm Shield ads are just very, very inefficient for count. They're very dangerous, they're very bulky, very healthy, and they don't give a ton of extra percent. So whenever you you do want to skip those, particularly in higher keys. And then other thing to note, in these packs, we focus down that Storm Surge totem. Yes, it shoots out a little bit of buff orbs. No, it's not really significant, it doesn't really matter. And killing that totem mitigates the giant AoE that the Stormcaller ads do. You just take 0 damage from the AoE instead of getting your health nuked to like 50% or even worse than that. So that's why your prio in all of these packs should be that totem. It's a tiny buff. The buff is not worthwhile. It's not worth keeping the totem up for the entire pack. You're just going to die to the AoE. So don't keep those up for sure. And so now we get to the Raging Tempest itself. And as you can see, that patrol is still alive. So we're spreading around. We have Lust here. We're actually like Lust is only like a minute off of cooldown, right? So we're lusting at about 12 minutes here. We do actually probably lust a little bit early. You probably should lust like the first Tempest or Electrical Storm rather on this boss fight, just because then people actually have stacks. And so the recent nerfs of this boss actually let these orbs last for 18 seconds. So here's where the boss fight gets tricky, right? Usually I'd want to not waste that orb there and run up and get it, but because the patrol was right there when that happened, you have to play a little bit more in the platform. Particularly just the one player that is near where the patrol is at that time just has to be aware of that and not move too far out of the platform. Sometimes that means you're wasting orbs, like in this situation, but honestly, if it means that you don't have to play that pack, very, very good, very worthwhile. Just need to be careful. Like, for example, if the pat was out here, you couldn't be playing here or here, right? But the pat's not there, so they are safe to back up. And you'll see when the pat goes around them, they'll play back inside towards the boss a little bit just to not pull that pat. Now, in terms of orb collecting here, the 18-second duration on these orbs make it so you can actually just roll this buff the entire fight. And what you're going to see here is the healer soaking literally every orb in existence early on in the fight, because the first person you want 10 stacked on this fight is your healer. Surprisingly, maybe for a few people, but there is a lot of damage coming out in this Electrical Storm, and so your healer being stacked up early in the fight so they can heal through this storm and then roll their healing buff the entire fight is pretty important here for sure. Usually the tank gets the lowest priority on these orbs, just because, you know, the healer kind of needs it to keep everyone alive, and then the DPS take it to obviously do more damage. Note though, for the big spell reflect tech on this boss, of course, it does scale the damage with your stack, so you can pump out spell reflect damage on this boss if you just back away from the boss here. Whenever he's not doing an electrical storm, right, you take that wind burst or whatever it's called, and you deal a ton of damage. And here's the little thing: you're seeing us wait till the very end to try and collect that orb, because that will let you hopefully roll your buff into the first spawn post the storm here. So here's the spell reflect tech. Do I do it here? No. As you can see, the patrol's coming. These guys, before you saw them playing further out, now the patrol's right behind them. They play close to the boss so they don't pull them. Yeah, so I soaked my orb a little early here. The healer was able to slow roll though, so he'll be able to run out and keep his stacks. I was slow though, or I was too fast, sorry, in the intermission soak. I should have waited until the orb was way closer to the boss. And here's me running out, and here's the wind burst. This is what you spell reflect, and deals a big burst of damage to the boss, and you can do that literally like on spell reflects cooldown as well. And from there, this fight is just kind of rinse and repeat. You just need to be aware of this patrol, want to try and roll your stack so soak late in those electrical storms, and then we also rotate defensives for electrical storms. So as you saw for that first one, we had Devo Aura. We also have things like immunities available for later ones, and we also have, of course, rally from the warrior available for later storms as well. We planned for 3 storms here, I believe, so rally was supposed to be used for the 3rd storm. We end up killing this boss before the 3rd storm though, so we didn't actually need it, but just make sure you pre-plan out uses of those defensive CDs there, because that storm is a lot of damage. And of course, like I mentioned, big priority on getting your healer to max stacks ASAP, and this boss will just be a whole lot easier. That's Tempest though, and then we go to where we get the bulk of our percent in the dungeon over by Tira and Marook. To start off here, that nasty little 3-pack of birds that flies over this patrol, or flies over this entire area rather, can be a bit annoying. And so what we do here is we pull this easy beast collar pack just down here into the middle of these 2 soul collar packs, and we just grab these birds and add them to this. Makes them much easier to deal with. You usually are almost done with the birds in this pack by the time these boards get here. It depends on the pat timing, but relatively easy to handle, whereas it can be very, very chaotic if these guys jump down on you in the middle of one of these mini boss packs. So that's how we handle that, and then we just go into the mini boss packs themselves. One thing to note, actually, Rotting Wind, another ability that previously was not stoppable, but now is. So if you sync them up, it's literally 1 AoE CC to stop all of the frontal cones, which is really nice. Otherwise, as you can see here, I'm just kind of like, you're not moving a ton. You don't want to spin these birds around the entire pack. You want to be very, very calculated with your positioning of these winds. Just a slight movement here. I know the winds are on cooldown, so I can do a bigger movement here to get out of that AoE there. Note that AoE will buff only certain mobs. It only buffs like the risen mobs and like the desecrated mobs. It doesn't actually buff like the soul harvester itself. It is like a DR on the mob, so you do want to try and pull those smaller mobs out of the pack, or out of the AoE rather, if you can. But it's really not the end of the world if like 1 or 2 of them are inside of it, because again, only some of the mobs get buffed by that AoE, and those mobs tend to have just way less HP in general, so something you can get around here. The main priority here, 2 melee kicks on the Soul Harvester mini bosses in all of these packs, and that's just to get Death Bolt Volley. And as you can see, I'm just slowly moving out of the pack as the Chant of the Dead happens. And also note, Risen Warriors are a pretty high priority stop. Post nerf, Mortal Strike is actually not a big deal, just because the cooldown's longer. It stacks up like way slower. You don't really chain it unless you have like a double warrior pull. But honestly, it is kind of hard to stop, but if you can stop it, it is pretty nice, right? Of course, not having a healing reduction on your tank, who would have guessed that that would be a nice thing to have, but it's not the end of the world if it goes off. That is something that you can try and stop if you, you know, are feeling like you have fast reflexes. Moving on here, like these pulls, nothing really to talk about. You can stop that Corruptor, as you saw there, who's channeling the orbs. It's not really a giant deal. It's mostly just to make sure he stays grouped with the packs. Otherwise, these Death Bolts just kind of spam at your tank. So extra kicks that aren't already assigned to the Soul Harvester can go into those. And in this basically whole area, we're just kind of chain pulling. The Mystics here, they have that group haste buff and Swift Wind. Notably, if you have a DK in your group, you can control Undead that mob and give that haste buff to you, like on a pretty low cooldown. I think it's like every pack you can give yourself that haste buff, which is pretty big for group damage there. So note that. Make sure you yoink one of those if you have a DK in the group. Otherwise, we just kind of nuke the pack down. Also, not ideal to let that cast off. If you don't have a DK, make sure you like stop or kick it. We let it off. It buffs everything with haste. Not ideal. So don't do that, preferably. But we're just chain pulling in this whole area, basically, because this trash mob, especially post-nerf, are pretty easy to do. We pulled these 2 Corruptors over here by accident, I think, so don't pull those. You don't actually need it for count. You just need this 4-pack that I did pull, or 5-pack, or whatever. Relatively easy mobs. This is a double warrior pull. Saw there, Shockwave, good well-timed Shockwave to prevent the Mortal Strike from going out here. 2 stacks on the Mortal Strike is kind of not ideal for sure. We stopped one of them there, only one went off. That's perfectly fine. Otherwise, nothing to talk too much about here about this trash pack. We just kind of go around until Lust is off cooldown. So the priority here is to make sure that you've actually killed all of these Soul Harvesters by the time Lust is on cooldown. So we're going from Soul Harvester, flying across here after, to the final Soul Harvester pack. Yeah, this is the final Soul Harvester pack across the area. And we still have 2 minutes on Bloodlust. So we're going to kill this pack here. And then I believe right after this 40 seconds on Bloodlust, so we're getting there. There is an RP once you've killed all the Soul Harvesters. Someone has to go trigger. So as you see here, we're getting close to the end of this pack. The healer goes to go trigger the RP, and we do one more pull in the meantime, just a double pull here with the Beast Collar and this pack in the middle here. But cards don't really do anything, so I'm really worried about them. Pull these guys together, and this is our pull that we do just while the RP is ticking and while we are still waiting on that last few seconds of Bloodlust to come off cooldown here. Then we're going to rip Bloodlust onto Tira and Marook. Similarly, all this trash is kind of the same here. We do need to do one more pull in this area, but the priority here is to just get Bloodlust on cooldown. So that's what we do. That's why we go to the boss and then do a trash pack afterwards there. So let's move forward a little bit, and we get to the boss. You can see they're just already spawned because we already triggered that RP. Now, in terms of Tira and Marook themselves, the main thing here as the tank is to just always try and keep them together. Brutalize is a very hard-hitting tank buster, especially on Tyrannical keys, so be aware of that. Quick shot's just a random target hit, and as a tank, as you see here, keeping them together is your priority, so you want to be pre-moving. Whenever you see this white circle pop up, the boss, Tira, is it Tira? No, the arrow, it is Tira. Yeah, she'll face a direction, this white circle will appear, and that's where she's jumping. You always want to run immediately as the tank at this white circle. Note, anyone asking, curious, I've had this question a lot. You take no damage by standing in this white circle. It doesn't do any damage, so you can pre-move, range, whatever, to this white circle. Perfectly safe to do so. And pre-moving, as I showed right there, let's just group these guys up so they don't get many, if any, stacks of the buff, the damage buff. Then we're getting to the Gale Arrow ability here, and this does individual damage to everyone but the tank. It's a big hit, and it'll shoot tornadoes from them as well. As you see, we're stacked up here. Preferably, you would have everyone stacked up in one spot because that makes it so you don't have to dodge. If you can't get in, though, having a range camp and a melee camp is fine. But for a lot of healers, it's also easier to heal up if you have everyone stacked in one spot. So recommendation here is have everyone, including the range, stack up in melee, so that melee self-up time, and it's easier to heal. But if you have to, you have the two camps here, and what that does is it spawns all the tornadoes in one or two locations, and it makes them significantly easier to dodge. Like, it's way easier to avoid them, and it's even easier if everyone's in one spot. So keep that in mind there. The only other weird kind of timing for this boss as a tank that's very important is this one here, right before the Earth Splitter goes out. You really want to make sure you're pre-moving, like I mentioned, because if that boss gets caught out when that knockback goes out, the repel, and the Earth Splitter starts channeling while the boss is like a little bit away from Tira, Tira is going to start stacking up really high, and those quick shots are going to hurt. So you really want to make sure you're getting those bosses, especially during that repel or splitter overlap, on top of each other so they don't stack up while Marook is planted. Otherwise, though, this boss is all about just the Gale Arrow is really the only thing that's going to kill you. That overlap with the Gale Arrow into quick shots is gone now. It got nerfed and removed, so you don't have to worry about that. It's just not making sure you're not getting one shot by that actual Gale Arrow hit. Anyway, if we do this boss, once the boss is dead, you're going to see we're going to do our last trash pack. And we are going to be slightly over percent because, as I mentioned, we butt pulled that 2-pack. And so what we do here, I skipped over it. There we go. If we're just dragon riding, the pack is like right beside where we want it. So this is what we pulled together here. These 7 mobs. Pull them together and we just do big damn to them. And again, not much to talk about with these mobs. We've talked about them all in this area already. So let's then skip to how we get to the final boss. And we go through a skip that's probably more well-known now, wasn't known initially. So you just go along the side here. Actually, let me, I had the map open. Let's do that. Wait for the map to be open, and I'll show you where we enter. No, so fast. Here we go. There it is. Okay, so we're going to enter basically up here. So instead of going through the front gate, which is over here, we go from the south area. Basically, if you go straight north from Tira and Marook, you can get over, there's like a little, this cliff right there. You can see we're just going. This cliff right here is where you're aiming at. And it's just very easy to skip. You enter right here. It's just a bunch of yellow mobs you can just walk right past. Nothing you need to dodge around. There's a patrol like over here, but you just walk around this way, and you literally avoid everything, and you're at the boss in seconds. Very easy. It's way faster than the other direction, and so definitely would recommend it. There is also a skip for these mini bosses. So what you can do for these mini bosses is you can have any combat drop, like pull these guys away and have the rest of your party pull the boss. It's important that you do pull the boss while the person's pulling these away and then drops combat. Or you can have them pull these guys over towards here, die if you don't have a combat drop class, right? If you don't have a rogue, a mage, or a hunter or a night elf in your group, you can still do this skip by having some person pull this, die, and you battle res them. Because of course, like I mentioned, you have to pull the boss while they do this, just to avoid these guys pulling into the boss. So one person pulls these ads, everyone else pulls the boss. They either combat drop or die, and then rejoin the fight or get battle resed, and you do the boss from there. That lets you skip these guys. If you're not doing a Giga High Key, pulling these guys is just fine. Look how much time we have. There's no reason to do that bit of a dangerous play on the boss. You lose space, of course, on the boss to do that. So instead, we're just killing these guys here because we have that time. Not a big deal if you want to do that for safety at all, but they're just too big, very healthy mobs. They aren't worth the count because of their very, very high HP, and because in this area, there's nothing you can really pull on top of them either, not too well anyways, and so they're not really worth the time it takes to kill them. Plus, the annoying charging everywhere. Notice we're using the wall here to prevent that charge from going too far. It's still annoying though, and they're still just very beefy in general, so they're not really worth the time. So you're going to see most routes move away from pulling these guys in high keys, but not the end of the world. Totally fine, especially if you're pugging to do those guys. And then you're going to see where pull the boss here. And we're moving over to this rock, which you can use to prevent the boss from moving when he charges. If you just go on the other side of this rock, the charger will hit the rock, and melee can maintain uptime. Now, as a tank, this first phase is actually scarier than the second phase, and the scariest part is going to be the overlap coming in a second here, which I believe I probably die to because I don't respect it enough. It's my first high Tyrannical Nokhud, so it's the Rending Strike here, which is a nasty bleed, into obviously the Cyber Strike, which is normal, into this upheaval. And just look at my health here. It's a lot of damage. You really want to make sure that you respect the overlap with the Rending Strike plus the upheaval as a tank in this first phase, because it's a big bleed hit, you get a big tank buster hit, and then you have big ticking damage all back to back to back as a tank. And individually, those things aren't super scary, but when they're all together as a tank, very, very scary, especially on high Tyrannical. Something also that just happened there you can combat drop the spear. Rogue vanished. Spear does no damage. Doesn't happen. Nice. Also very good in the second phase of the lightning phase as well. Huge amount of damage mitigation from that. So again, combat drops, shadow meld, all can do that. Just yet another dungeon where shadow meld or the combat drops are very, very powerful, similar to like Halls of Valor on the boss there. Big damage mitigation if you have access to those. And then we get to the 60% intermission phase, and there have been a couple strategies for this. This is what I recommend actually if you don't have a DK in your group. If you have a DK in your group, you just A-bomb limb and you pull all these mobs together and you just chain AoE stops and kicks once they're already grouped in. If you don't have a DK, I don't recommend doing that because you have to commit so many individual kicks to group everything up, and then you're just kind of out of things, because usually on these far guys, for example, you need like 2 kicks to get them in, and you need 2 kicks on these inner guys. It's a lot. So what we're going to do here is we just hard CC this side over here, and we killed 2 on the other side, and we just killed them in pairs. And so we guarantee that we have kicks and stops for literally every cast, because especially on Tyrannical and getting into high Tyrannical with the ticking damage going out, a like single one of these casts, if you're not at full HP, is just going to be a one shot. That's just the way it is. And so that's why we do that. So we used Fear and Blind here because that's just what we had. Obviously, like Hunter Trap, Polymorph, Hex, any CC. These guys are humanoids, so like literally everything can CC them basically. So keep that in mind. We do it 2 by 2. But if you had any form of DK, you would be fine doing them all 4 at once, just because grip is just so powerful for this mechanic anyways, just grouping up the ads. AoE interrupt taunt is like okay. The problem is they're too spread out, similar with like Silent Sigil. They're just too spread out, so you can't hit all of them at the same time. You can only hit 2 at a time, so it's still like a bit of a pain for grouping. So I don't really recommend doing that either. I do think the 2 by 2 is way safer. It means you don't need to commit Bloodlust to this intermission phase. You can just kind of chill to it. We still have Bloodlust on cooldown. We're just going too fast for this key. So you'd probably want to Bloodlust the second phase, in my opinion, the lightning phase of this boss. And that means you don't need to commit Bloodlust to this to try and kill all 4 at the same time if you don't have a DK. That brings us to the lightning phase. Same rock. The big thing here is making sure, one, that you keep this rock area clean, because remember, you are dropping puddles now in this phase. Not these swirlies necessarily, the actual crackling upheaval puddles drop. So when that happens, you're going to see us like spread out to keep the rock safe, just so we can keep melee uptime pretty decent, even though we only have like, well, I guess we have the 3 melee. But otherwise, Spell Reflect, that Conductive Strike, very, very powerful. Big damage and also big tank damage mitigation from mitigating both those abilities. Otherwise, just to spell it, that is very, very beneficial as well. There's a Static Spear, and that's a bug that we had. So the bug we have right now is, that's currently in the game, should be fixed soon. It is on their radar, is that the spear, the lightning spear in particular, is double ticking on the current target of the spear. And what it seems like that's related to, not 100% confirmed, is that if you move in any way, when that spear goes out on you, you get double ticked. So what you have to do as the target in this phase, if you don't have a combat drop or you're not a rogue, a hunter, a night elf, or a mage, to completely mitigate that damage, what you would do is you would go behind the rock and you would plant and you would not move until the pull goes off. Otherwise, you can see the paladin almost got one shot there through Devo. It's very, very painful if you move whatsoever. It's a bug. It should be fixed hopefully soon, but just be aware of that, at least for now. It is double ticking on the current target. So be careful with that. Then we get that crackling upheaval. See, everyone moves away. So we've kept the rock area clear so that we can still use the rock for the next charge. Just something to keep in mind. And then from there, otherwise, it's basically the same thing, right? Use the rock to block the charge. Combat drop it if you can. Make sure you plant. Yeah, see, double ticking. Like, the double ticking on this boss is absolutely insane, especially on higher Tyrannical. So hopefully it does get fixed relatively soon, so you don't have to worry about that murdering you. Otherwise, just do your best here and try and pop a big personal if you're the spear target and you don't have a combat drop, because there's a good chance you do get double. Not even sure what's going on there. Barely surviving here from I think that was the dead body thundering. Good timing there, but we do manage to pull it out, and just as Lust is coming off cooldown. There we have it though, guys, my advanced guide and walkthrough of a timed +20 Nokhud offensive. Hopefully you guys did learn something here, and if you did, be sure to give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. Your support really does help me out. I'll be putting out videos just like this one here for the rest of the Dragonflight dungeons over on my channel and beyond the rest of the expansion as well. So make sure you guys are on the lookout for those. If you have any questions about how we handled this dungeon that I didn't cover, maybe tanking in general, whatever it is, feel free to leave those down in the comments below, or come stop by and ask me on my Twitch channel at Tactics, where I stream high Mythic Plus keys just like this one, and Mythic raids from a tank's perspective. Otherwise, thanks everyone so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.